Assalamu alaikum, everyone. God willing, we're going to read today from Surah 43, verse 15. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Angels as daughters of blasphemy. They even assign for him a share from his own creation. Surely the human being is profoundly unappreciative. Has he chosen from among his creations daughters for himself, while blessing you with sons? When one of them is given news of a daughter, as they claim for the most gracious, his face is darkened with misery and anger. They say, what is good about an offspring that is brought up to be beautiful and cannot help in war? They claim that the angels who are servants of the most gracious are females. Have they witnessed their creation? Their claims are recorded and they will be asked. They even said, if the most gracious willed, we would not have worshipped them. They have no basis for such a claim, they only conjecture. Have you given them a book before this and they're upholding it? So, no. So these verses, are talking about the angels being ascribed as daughters to God, and we know it's kind of similar to, um, ascribing like a human being as the son of God, and here they're ascribing angels as daughters of God, and it's a blasphemy because God does not have any partner. He does not have he does not need a son and a daughter. And then at the same time, it also shed some light on the bias, the bigoted bias that people have regarding baby girls when they get a son, they're happy, and when God gives them a daughter, which is a blessing, that they should be appreciative of, their face is darkened with misery and anger. And so, which is why we shouldn't um, have a preference when it comes to having children. It's up to God whether He grants people sons or daughters or no children. I mean, of course, you can ask God for children, but it's not right to have a preference to have a girl or a boy, because it's up to God. He gives them, and they're all blessings from God. And but another aspect that it highlights is people's tendency to attribute lives to God, and we can see that they do it here, as it's clear, without any sort of proof. They have no proof that they have not witnessed the creation of the angels, as we see here. And they even uh, and they worship them, and then they even blame God that if God wanted, we wouldn't have worshiped them. So we're worshiping them because it's God's will, and that it's so they're people blame God for that, and they have no basis for such a claim. Um, and uh, this just shows the how people will fabricate lies to God without any proof, and they take it in vain because they truly don't believe that they'll be held accountable for their lies. There's also a footnote for verse 20. It says the idol worshippers cannot blame God for their idolatry, since we have absolute freedom of choice to worship God alone or not. So people cannot blame God for their idol worship because, as it says here, we have complete freedom. I mean, God didn't force us to commit idol worship. Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, you're doing it in accordance with God's will because you chose it, but you made the act, you made the conscious choice to worship idols. It wasn't God who did it. And this goes for any sort of idol worship. When people go, I mean, we still see people make similar claims like, why didn't God do this? And if God wanted, like he would have clarified this here or there. I mean, God did clarify everything, and you can't blame God for your own idol worship. So God willing, I'll continue. Verse 21 says, inherited traditions condemned. The fact is, they said, we found our parents carrying on certain practices, and we are following their footsteps. Invariably, when we sent a warner to any community, the leaders of that community would say, we found our parents following certain practices and will continue to follow in their will continue in their footsteps. The messenger would say, what if I brought to you better guidance than what you inherited from your parents? They would say, we are disbelievers in the message you brought. Consequently, we requited them. Note the consequences for the rejectors. So, I mean, this is a very significant uh, piece of information that we see here in the Quran about inherited traditions. You know, people will question where in the Quran is such and such thing prohibited, you know, that we don't see it in the Quran. Of course, people create innovations and attribute it to God. And then when you tell them that this is an innovation, you should not be doing it, then they raise a question to you like, who are you to prohibit this? Where does God say in the Quran that, you know, this thing is prohibited? Well, it's right here. Inherited traditions are condemned. And when these people come and they tell them to stop doing these things, you know, innovations attributed to God, they first they you know say they found their parents doing these practices and they will follow in their footsteps, and they did that throughout humanity. I mean, now that the messenger of God has come and everything's been clarified, even people who say they believe are still doing that. And I mean, it's the same thing, and they found their parents carrying on certain practices. And I hate to keep bringing it up, but circumcision, you know, is one of them. It's inherited practice that, you know, people kept doing and doing, and now people are still doing it, and they don't want to stop. You know, they found their parents doing it. Their parents found their parents doing it, and the messenger tells them, you know, what if I brought you better guidance than what your parents, what you inherited from your parents? But you know, it just causes them to disbelieve. And then, ironically, we have Abraham's example. Right after that, Abraham's example, verse 26. Abraham said to his father and his people, I disown what you worship. Only the one who initiated me can guide me. The example of Abraham was rendered an everlasting lesson for a subsequent generation. Perhaps they redeemed their souls. Indeed, I have given these people and their ancestors sufficient chances. Then the truth came to them, and a clarifying messenger. When the truth came to them, they said, this is magic, and we are disbelievers therein. So Abraham's example is in the Quran. Abraham was extremely kind. When his father, you know, decided to disbelieve and you know, turn against Abraham for you know, worshiping God alone, because he was an idol worshiper. Abraham's father was an idol worshiper. Abraham, though he was extremely kind and clement, he disowned his father. And he said, the only one who initiated me can guide me. And this example of Abraham was rendered an everlasting lesson for subsequent generations. So, you know, so Abraham was never an idol worshiper, and we know that from the Quran. Even Muhammad was an idol worshiper before he was given the messengership, and before, you know, he was made a messenger from God. He was an idol worshiper, but Abraham was never an idol worshiper, being the first messenger of submission. You know, Muhammad was an idol worshiper, even Rashad was an idol worshiper, but Abraham was never an idol worshiper. And he, you know, his example has been, you know, it's an everlasting lesson for all generations. Everybody, all religions, you know, they know and respect Abraham for. I mean, even though of course the message is confused and, you know, it has been contaminated with all kinds of lies about Abraham, you know, but still they know Abraham was a prophet of God, and, you know, he worshipped God alone, and, you know, He's known for that. But his example in the Quran is made an everlasting lesson for subsequent generations, everlasting, because this Quran is protected by God, and it's the unaltered word of God, and it has physical, tangible evidence that we can witness at any given time. So this is gonna, this is being the final testament, is gonna last through the end of the world, and so this his name will never be forgotten. His example will never be forgotten as someone who truly worshiped God alone, and God made this an example for people that they may redeem their souls. I mean, these examples are there for us to learn from, obviously, and we must all be like them. These are role models for us to follow in their footsteps. When the truth came to them, they said, "This is magic, and we're disbelievers therein." So, I mean, God has given us, uh, you know, uh, sufficient chances. He has given our ancestors sufficient chances. He has, documented their history for us to learn from. He has sent us a clarifying messenger also. In our times, we have a messenger from God who has really clarified things like extremely well, right? SubhanAllah. But they still said this is clever magic. I mean, these are literally the words that you hear from people when you present to them the mathematical proof. They say this is just a trick. And we see the same thing throughout humanity, like history. Throughout history, I mean, people have rejected the messenger, and these are the same utterances that they say over and over again. It just reflects that they're failing in the test, and going against God's system, because God decides to send messengers to guide people, and so it's in accordance with God's will that He sends messengers, and it is our duty to follow them. If we trust them and we follow them, we're going to be guided. But people choose to want to be guided on their own. They don't want the messenger to tell them, and this is basically comes from ego, because they can't stand the fact that God made someone else a messenger and not them. And they would not want to follow another human being that's just like them, has no visible superiority over them, that they can see. And so this, their ego causes them to jealousy, and ego causes them to rebel against God's system, and then they just basically end up being trapped by Satan. Muhammad ridiculed. They said, if only this Quran, verse 31, they said, if only this Quran was sent down through another man from the two communities, Mecca and Yathrib, who is prominent. Are they the ones who assign your Lord's mercy? We have assigned their shares in this life, raising some of them um, above others in ranks, in order to let them serve one another. The mercy from your Lord is far better than any material they may hoard. So, Muhammad, being the second messenger of submission, was also ridiculed, just like all the other messengers. And they basically weren't happy with the fact that Muhammad wasn't as prominent enough, to be chosen as a messenger from God. And this basically questions God's wisdom. God is the one who chose whomever was most suitable to deliver God's message at that time, right? And so um so they only did that as a ridicule, because obviously they looked down upon Muhammad during the time as well. And but God is telling us here that God is the one who assigns people's shares in this life, and raising people above others in ranks, in order to let them serve one another. So this has nothing to do with choosing a messenger. Obviously, the messenger does not have to be from a prominent community. I mean, those things are just there in order for God's system to work, and to test people as well. But obviously to make the system work for us, obviously, if you if you don't have a CEO, for example, you're not going to have workers that are going to work for him. So he makes a system so people manage other people, for example, right? And sort of how, and then you have the president and all those things. So these are all, or kings or whatever, So this is a system that God has put in place from the worldly ranks, just so people can serve one another, and this worldly system continues. But this doesn't have anything to do with the messengership. God will choose a person to be a messenger who's best suited for the job, and popular is not one of them. So God's mercy is far better than anything people can hoard, as it says in this verse. So people usually look at the things that they see. They respect people that they think they're richer and higher in rank, and look down upon people that they don't think have an authority. But obviously in God's eyes, these things do not really matter much. God says people who choose this worldly life, God will rush to them what they want and what they deserve, and then they get no share in the hereafter. But people whose goals is a here whose ultimate goal is to be successful in the hereafter, he will give them the worldly things as well, but he will equip them with what they need for their hereafter. So they are happy both in this life and the hereafter. But on the other hand, if someone's prominent and rich and whatever, I mean, popular, that that doesn't help them in any way or help other people in any way. I mean, someone who has the ability to deliver the message is someone that God will choose, and so that he can do the job. So we are not the ones who assign, who is most suitable to deliver God's message. It's God who delivers, who does that, because it's a messenger of God, someone who's delivering his message. So that's should be common sense for people, to never question God's wisdom like that. Materials of this world, all that the disbelievers get. Verse 33. If it were not that all the people might become one disbelieving congregation, we would have granted everyone who disbelieves in the most gracious mansions with silver roofs and stairs upon which they could climb. Their mansions would have impressive gates and luxurious furnishings, and also many ornaments. All these are temporary materials of this lowly life. The hereafter at your Lord is far better for the righteous. Mhm. So imagine, if everyone in the world was that rich who disbelieved, what would happen? Everybody would become a disbeliever, because they see that how much wealth you can achieve if you disbelieve. They will all disbelieve, and the entire world would become one disbelieving congregation. And the more money, obviously, all these disbelievers have, the more mischief and corruption they would all spread, right? So there would be no righteous people left in this world. I mean, everyone would become corrupt. But really, what this shows to us is that, you know, it's just for this reason that they don't all have this kind of riches. Everybody would be filthy rich, and like when it talks about, you have granted everyone who disbelieves mansions with silver roofs and stairs upon which they could climb, with impressive gates and luxurious furnishings and many ornaments. I mean, think of, like, every person having their own, like, Trump Tower, and things like that, and palaces and all that. I mean, so, but all these things to God, this is nothing. This is all that the disbelievers get, and then the hereafter they have no share. That is why the hereafter is far better for the righteous, because it's everlasting, of course, right? I mean, this doesn't even need more explanation, but really we have to keep reminding ourselves that sometimes we can get carried away with these illusions that we see around us, and we think that people who are more wealthy and have these luxuries are somewhat favored by God, or more fortunate than us, and things like that. I mean, obviously, but uh, what we should want from God is the hereafter. I mean, we should really want to be like the messengers and prophets who worship God, and God redeemed them. Rather than looking at these the worldly materials that these people have and wanting to get what they have. So these are just worldly materials. I mean, they're nil, really, if you compare it to the hereafter. Of course, because when these people die, all they have was their works and their deeds. So it's all that really matters for us. So we should always have a clear goal in mind, like what we're striving for in this world. Is this the materials, or is this God? Is it God? Invisible devilish companions. Verse 36. Anyone who disregards the message of the Most Gracious, we appoint a devil to be his constant companion. Such companions will divert them from the path, yet make them believe that they're guided. When he comes before us, he will say, "Oh, I wish you were as far from me as the two easts. What a miserable companion. It will not console you on that day, uh, as transgressors, so both of you will share in the retribution." And footnote for verse 36 says, each one of us has a representative of Satan as a constant companion. Appendix 7. And then footnote for verse 38 says, the east imply the location of sunrise, moonrise, and the rising of heavenly bodies. Okay. So when it talks about the invisible devilish companions, uh, we all have companions, as it says here, a representative of Satan as our constant companion. But anyone who disregards the message of the Most Gracious, they get a devil to be his constant companion. Of course, there's jinns that are righteous jinns or may become righteous jinns, but then there are the devils. There's devils among the humans and devils among the jinns, right? And so if the human being deserves to go to hell, I mean, God will appoint a devil to be his constant companion also, right? And that is such a system, such a impeccable system that God has put in place, is that this companion will very, very professional, very in a very like smooth manner, he will divert these people that they won't even realize that they're going to hell, right? And uh, they're so sure that they're going to heaven, right? And they will divert them to be their constant companion. He will divert them, the constant companion will divert them from the path, yet make them believe that they are guided. So they believe that they're guided. But, this shows to us that there are people in this world that have these devils as their companions that are devils themselves, human devils, and then they have companions that are devils. And those companions have made them believe that they're guided. And we see that, don't we? We see that all the time. There are people that think that they're guided and they're totally astray, but they're so confident and so ignorant and so arrogant about their ways that they think that they're on the right path. And this is just shows, this in practice, what the devils are doing. And then as it talks about uh, in verse 39, on that day, both of these people will be in hell, the jinn and the human. Both of them will be in hell. Sorry, yeah, both of them will be in hell. And when it talks about the two east here, it's talking about the locations of sunrise, moonrise, and the rising of the heavenly bodies. So any place where these heavenly bodies rise are known as east. Verse 40, God's messenger of the covenant. Can you make the deaf hear? Can you make the blind see, or those who are far astray? Whether we let you die before it or not, we will surely requite them, or we may show you the retribution we promised for them. We are in full control. We're in full control over them. You shall steadfastly preach what is revealed to you. You are in the right path. This is a message for you and your people. All of you will be questioned. Check the messengers we sent before you. Have we ever appointed any other gods besides the most gracious to be worshipped? For example, we sent Moses with our proofs to Pharaoh and his elders, proclaiming, I'm a messenger from the Lord of the universe. When he showed them our proofs, they laughed at them. Moses and Pharaoh. Every sign we showed them was bigger than the one before it. We afflicted them with plagues, perhaps they repent. So first of all, we see about God's messenger of the covenant, uh, and it's the footnote for 43 says the sum of the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa 1230 plus 43 is 1273 or 19 times 66. So this is referring to God's messenger of the covenant, that you shall steadfastly preach what is revealed to you in the right path. So the messenger of the covenant was on the right path, and the message that he brought for us is the right message. And so people should not be skeptical when it comes to following the teachings that this person has brought, or is explaining. People always think that what the messenger is saying, yeah, I mean, he's a messenger, but how can I know he's telling the truth? Well, if you believe he's a messenger, then you better believe him because he's a messenger. A messenger is not going to trick you. God is not going to trick you by sending a messenger who he says is on the right path, but then he wants to trick you, and so you have to pick and choose what you want to believe. But apparently, it's a very common thing, right? We see that all around us. There are people claiming to be submitters, claiming to accept the messenger of the covenant, and they they will pick and choose what they want to believe from the messenger and discard the rest of it, that is not to their liking, right? And this just shows that it's lip service, because if you truly believe he's a messenger of God, then you know that the message he's brought is from God. That's him. That's what makes him a messenger, and you better listen to him, if you want to be saved. But like I said, these people will go against God's system, and they want to be guided on their own without the messenger and using Quran alone. But obviously, that leads them astray, and we can see the results of that. As these people start going downhill like really fast, and we can see many of them. They're not even doing any of the practices, like salat, and some of them are doing three prayers, some of them are not doing any prayers, not observing Hajj, and so many other things, and inventing, all kinds of innovations in religion. And I mean, this is just all a result of not accepting a messenger from God. And obviously, the people who are following a satanic cult of, so-called Islam, how they refuse to accept the messenger of the covenant and where they're headed with all the innovations that they're practicing as well. And so, of course, all of these people will be questioned. They're simply committing idol worship, by worshiping these other gods. But God would never send a messenger uh, to ask them to idolize someone else besides God. And how that would happen is, if God sends a messenger and then he comes and tells you some things from God, and then he would fabricate certain lies, let's say, for the sake of the argument, and then you start idolizing the messenger because God didn't tell you to do certain things, but the messenger is saying that, right? So that the messenger would be the idol. But that never happens. No messenger, God would never send a messenger to even do that, right? Because his job is to tell you to worship God alone. He wouldn't tell you to idolize himself. But that's what a fake messenger would do, obviously. A fake messenger would come first without a proof, most likely, and tell you to worship God, but then will tell you to do other things that are not from God, either by telling you that he's correcting something from another messenger, or telling you some other things, lies that you have to follow so that you can idolize him. So they can never really preach worship of God alone. But the actual messengers of God will always tell you to worship God alone. And we see the example here is example of Pharaoh, uh, that he was given uh, the message through Moses. And So he said, when he showed them, so when he showed them all these proofs to Pharaoh, imagine the proofs that God gave to Moses. I mean, there was, big proofs, substantial proofs of his messengership. But when he showed them to Pharaoh, Pharaoh laughed at them. Imagine. Um, and God says that every sign we showed them was bigger than the first one, and we afflicted them with plagues, perhaps they repent. And so when the plagues would happen, um, we read in verse 49, I'm going to continue. It says, they said, O you magician, implore your Lord on our behalf, since you have an agreement with him to relieve this plague. We will then be guided. But as soon as we relieved their affliction, they reverted. Pharaoh announced to his people, O my people, do I not possess the kingship over Egypt, and these flowing rivers belong to me? Do you not see? Which one is better, me or that one who is lowly and can hardly speak? How come he does not possess a treasure of gold? How come the angels do not accompany him? He thus fooled his people, and they obeyed him. They were wicked people. When they persisted in opposing us, we punished them and drowned them all. We rendered them a precedent and an example for the others. So, I mean, see how these people reacted is it's really it's phenomenal. Like they call him first, they call him a magician. They don't even call him a messenger or by his name. Like, oh, you magician, implore your Lord on our behalf, since you have an agreement with him to relieve this plague. We'll then be guided. So they would do that. They would say, do this, and then we'll believe. And then when the plague would go away, then like, no, we're not gonna believe. We were just like, they were just messing with him. And I mean, so like, what is this, right? This is like really unintelligent for them to even do that. But obviously, we can see the result of that what happened to these people. But God gave them so many chances. So many things happened. And people are given chances likewise in this world too. They don't realize. But these are examples for us to learn from. And Pharaoh being so arrogant. I mean, there's people like that in the world today. You can recognize them. But Pharaoh was so arrogant like that. He thought everything was his. Everything that God gave was not God's, but that was actually his. It says, do I not possess kingship over Egypt? These flowing rivers belong to me. Everything belongs to God. But obviously, he failed to recognize that. And uh, then he compared himself to Moses and says, which one is better, me or one who's lowly and can hardly speak? So this shows that, I mean, Pharaoh had, Pharaoh, when Moses was talking to Pharaoh, Moses had a speech impediment because he would not say who can hardly speak. So some people believe that uh, when Moses asked God to help him to fix his speech, his prayer of fixing the speech was actually answered. But we know this is not true because that part was part of God's wisdom to keep there. But he was appointed. Aaron was appointed as his brother. Aaron was appointed as a prophet to assist him, but his speech impediment still remained. But God appointed his brother to be, his partner because Moses said he was more eloquent, and so God answered his prayer regarding that. But we know that he still had the speech impediment. It's part of God's plan, and you can see here it's in action, right? I mean, this is adding to Pharaoh's arrogance. Oh, this person can hardly even speak. Why would you want to listen to this guy? And this is what this is this is this shows to us, like, how God will keep things hidden, in a way that you don't go for the message based on the fact that it looks so shiny and the person presenting it is gorgeous, and it's like a supermodel or something, and it's not glamorous. It's so because God wants people to get the message for what it is. If something's shining and glittering, I mean, everybody's gonna want that, right? But if you're truly there for the message, you wouldn't care who's presenting the message or does this person have a speech impediment or not, or is this person popular or not. You're going to go for what the message is, right? I mean, you look at Rashad Khalifa, for example, as a messenger. I mean, he had a he had a very strong accent, right? And people would probably even make fun of that. But we know these things are just superficial things that are there for a good reason, left there for a good reason. Of course, I mean, if somebody's meant to be a messenger for this community, I mean, God could send him in a way that he speaks even better than everybody else, but that's not the point. And so we can see that how that would add to people's arrogance, and it did. And so using this kind of logic, Pharaoh fooled his people to say, "Look, all these things belong to me. Why would you want to listen to him? He can't even speak." And so the people believed him, right? Because they're thinking, yeah, I mean, what kind of messenger is he? He can't even speak. He can't even fix his own speech impediment, for example, right? And so this adds to their arrogance, and this adds to them being misguided because they were wicked people, So that gives them reasons to not believe this person. And then when these people persisted in opposing God, as it says here, God punished them, and we thus and it says we render them a precedent and example for the others. SubhanAllah. So I mean, this is an amazing example from God. I mean, everything about. I mean, you would wonder why, like, the story of Moses is explained and elaborated upon so much and so many times in the Quran, but this is for us to learn from. But you can see all these aspects of their lives, Pharaoh, the children of Israel, all of these things you see manifested in people today, in societies today. I mean, when I look at the children of Israel, for example, I look at the people who, like, for example, children of Israel, people who were with Moses at the time, who accepted the message, supposedly, and were following it, and you follow through their life, you can see the pattern. It exists. People who claim to be submitters and follow the message, have done all sorts of things very similar to the children of Israel. And you can see people who disbelieved in Moses, say very similar things against the messenger that they did to Moses. I mean, and people like Pharaoh have leaders who showed very similar reactions to the messenger of the covenant that we see from Moses, for example. So all these are lessons for us to learn from, to see what these people did and then what happened to them, right? What more importantly, what happened to them, and that's a lesson for us to learn from. That so that we shouldn't be like them, and we should take heed. When you look at some examples from the outside, um, looking in, I mean, you can learn a lot. Well, compared to when you're in something yourself, and if you're just looking at your situation, you might not realize. But when you look at someone else and you look at them from the outside looking in, I mean, you can see a lot sometimes, and that's why, like, we have these simplified examples. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more detail to it, but God has simplified it for us, like gave us the summary of everything, the highlights in detail, but to learn from, so that we can learn what happened to these people, so that we don't make the same mistakes and we don't end up like the children of Israel and the people, who you know, are documented in the Heifer, for example, and how they responded to God's commandments. Right? I mean, these are all examples from, and we see the situation of Heifer, a lot too, among people when they're asked to follow a commandment. So, uh, we must, constantly seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Obviously, he's going to try to trick us, as he tricked the children of Israel too, and even the people who believe with Moses. Of course, he only ended up with two believers, and most of these people were straight. Obviously, they had these companions that we just read about, and they made them think that they were on the right path. So we shouldn't become like that. We should be truly reflecting upon, examining our beliefs and our practices, and where we stand with God, and keep our eyes and ears open so that we don't end up becoming like these people. And I will open the floor for any comments or questions, God willing. Thank you.
Masha Allah, great study, Salman. Praise God.
So, thank you.
Masha Allah, very good. Praise God.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment. Such a scary thought. Verse 43. Invisible devilish companions, anyone who disregards the messenger of the most gracious, we appoint the devil to be his constant companion. Wow, wow. You know what a consequence. So that would be, he must come. It's like devil has already claimed this person so strong that he already showed a sign to go against God by rejecting the message when it comes to them. So then God appoints the devilish companion whom, yeah, it's a good point you raised, explained, mashallah, that there is one companion we already have, we're born with it, the jinn companion, and that has a chance to either, it can become, um, a submitter if we become a submitter. But I guess at that point, when a person rejects the message, maybe the jinn turns into devil. God makes that companion into devil, you know, who probably gains strength by this. Meaning, in other words, that he's um, successful in his mission by convincing the human companion to not worship God alone. So, in a way, it's his win already. And he gains so much strength from that. That on if this person, this human being, has rejected the message on his own free will and has chosen the path the other way. So the imagine, that's already a victory for the jinn companion, and he turns devil, and those people turn evil after that.
So I have a question. The companions we have as a submitters, they are also give us the Satan point of view. So they are also Satan's companion, no? But like jinn companions with the submitters, and what is the difference between those two companions which you were talking about?
So maybe I want to add something there. So there so first of all, like when it says anyone who disregards the message of the most gracious, we appoint a devil to be his constant companion. We all have a representative of Satan, right? But it's just God already knows the degree of evil that a person has and where he deserves to be. So he appoints those devils to be their companions. Like there are good jinns and there's bad jinns, right? Just like there's good humans and there's bad humans. Of course, they had all the jinns sided with Satan, but when they came here, there's still variations among them because there's a paradise for the jinns also, right? When they so then there's the jinns that will also go to high heaven and low heaven among them. But obviously there's bad jinns among them. So those bad jinns are the devils, just like you have the devilish humans, right? Like if you go to Surah, was it 114 or 110? Hold on. Yeah, Surah 110, I believe. So if you go to Surah 110, no, sorry, 114. Yeah, so it says, um, I seek refuge in the Lord of the people, the King of the people, the God of the people, from the evils of sneaky whisperers who whisper into the chests of the people, be they of the jinns or the people. Right? So there is uh, there are people that are uh, from the jinns, and actually there was another verse I was looking for, but maybe I'll find it later. But we know from that there's, there are devils among humans and there are devils among jinns. So those humans that are devils, God assigns the devilish jinns to their souls because God knows already, who they are. So he gives them, so then they, when they come here, then they do, act as, those devils, and they make those bad decisions. But God already knows them, who they are, so he matches them the right way. Just like, people who are righteous, God already knows, like, that they're righteous, and he already knows which souls are good, and he assigns righteous souls into the bodies of the children that righteous believers have, right? So in the same way, the jinns are also assigned in the similar fashion. I mean, a person who is very righteous is going to have a very righteous, is going to have a more righteous jinn too, rather more righteous than others, right? A jinn that will eventually be convinced of God's point of view and will cooperate with the human eventually. So the difference with the good jinn and a bad jinn is obviously that, a good jinn would be one who is pushing Satan's point of view, because that's what he is. But eventually, you will convince him, and eventually he will start following the right path, and he will be saved. But then there's the devilish companion, which will instead convince you, and both of you will go to hell, right? So that is a difference between the two. One is not devil, and you ends up being convinced by you, and then the other one ends up convincing you.
Subhanallah, I never thought in this way. MashaAllah, it's amazing understanding. Praise God. Now I understand. MashaAllah. Thank you.
You're welcome, Masha.
I know there is a surah in which Solomon, God is talking about giving in his service jinns and devils both. So there's a differentiation explained in that surah too. The devils could be very, like, already, devils could be those as well whose human companion has died and they're just wandering as very, already turned into devils, uh, basically have no hope. The most
Mashallah,
hope. Mhm. Sorry.
sorry, go ahead. No, I just thought you were finished.
No,
Sorry,
their
go
best chance is that while their human companion is alive, and he convinces, like how Rashad has also explained too, that the stronger we become as submitter, the lesser hold of the whispers of our, or the idea with jinn constantly gives human being becomes weaker and weaker, and eventually he turns into a submitter. So, and in Surah 55, God says, two heavens and two hells, one for the humans and one for the jinns. So some jinns will become submitters and go to heaven, but their own heaven, separate from humans, and the same thing for the hell as well. Yeah.
ahead. Mashallah. And the verse I was pointing out is actually um, Surah 6, verse 112. It says, Hadith and Sunnah fabrications by the Prophet's enemies. It says, we have permitted the enemies of every prophet, human and jinn devils, to inspire in each other fancy words in order to deceive. Had your Lord willed, they would not have done it. You shall disregard them and their fabrications. Um, so this is one of them, actually. And then I think there was another one I was thinking about, but um, But yeah, this is one of them. That's a human and jinn devils. Yeah, this also shows us why it's important for us to, seek refuge in God from Satan, the rejected, when we read Quran, and also seek refuge in God from Satan, and uh, when we when we sense any sort of whispers or devilish ideas.
So basically, whenever, even after like so many years we practice, if our companion is still giving us so many, whispers, so that means we have to uh, be strong to, he should not come up with those type of whispers. We have to be more strong on our understandings and our everything. Sometimes you get confused, am I right on this understanding or not, and Satan give you so much whispers. So um, that is the thing we have to, convey our uh, jinn companion, that okay, the understanding I am with is praise God, with the God Almighty, and
Hmm.
be strong on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Messenger of the Covenant actually talks about, how like you actually have the dialogue with him, like for example, he will try to bring doubts in you, like, this, for example, like to say like this message you're following is not from God or something, so you have a debate with him in your head, like if you get a whisper, so you talk back to him and you try to convince him, so it's like a constant arguments takes place in our head, right? When we're trying to make a decision. So same way, like, you have to convince him of God's point of view. So it's an active thing, like you do, you talk to him. Um, actually, some people find this pretty strange, but he actually did mention talking about this as well.
I
That
do that.
yeah,
I do that.
yeah,
No, no, no. Based on this, absolutely
yeah,
not. I'm not gonna listen. And
yeah.
also, mashallah. Sorry to cut you out, though.
No.
Um, Messenger of the Covenant also said, to no matter how many times you seek refuge in God from Satan, the rejected,
Hmm.
is not enough,
Yeah,
because
even if you do 200 times a day, he said. Yeah.
so at that time when we feel that it's a whisper and it's making me doubtful and making me shaky, um, then we right away seek refuge in God from Satan, the rejected, and the whole, those verses, lest they come near me. So we get clarity, and God guides us at that time, and we seek refuge because we already went into God's refuge away from the whisper. It's like, really, because that's in Arabic. It is 19 words. Mashallah, it's mathematically coded. So he protects us from Satan's ideas and blasphemies if he wants to make us doubtful.
MashaAllah. Thank you, guys.
Because it's so easy to stay uncertain. A lot of people love actually uncertainty. They do not even want to gain certainty. If we are not certain, we'll keep getting whispers. That's devil knows that these people are not certain. You know, so that the dialogue will go on and on forever in our heads. Alhamdulillah, in the light of Quran, we can always become certain after a little research and see, like, what goes against God's teachings, what goes against in the light of Quran. For example, people want to say, oh no, but nobody knows the answer. Some people, like, for example, let's take circumcision, right? Some people will end a conversation at, like, none of us will ever know the answer. Like, how is that even possible? We know that traditional Muslims, used to say or still say, nobody knows the meaning of initials. We will never know. We're not supposed to know. Well, why would God put something in the Quran we are not supposed to know? How is that even possible? Then why would God put it there as a mystery? Like, why would God why wouldn't God have a Quran without it? Obviously, they were supposed to be unveiled at a certain time. And same thing is that with circumcision, why didn't messenger say so? Well, did these people ever think about like upholding the Quran alone? That was his main mission, to bring us back to Quran. And could God not leave it as a test? Well, God says, you think you will uh, be left alone, left to say we believe without being put to the test? If people say we believe in the Quran alone, they will not be tested from something about the Quran. It would be the first test, actually, for those who proclaim. Maybe other people have failed even minor tests, right, to uphold the Quran alone. For example, bringing or following the messenger, like Solomon mentioned, following 3 times prayers, um, issues on insurance and charity. They're already fallen. And then these people who proclaim like we are so strong and strict and we do not um, tolerate any kind of you know compromise and this and that, and they were tested. uh, so this it was a very simple test, actually, right in their face. It's not in the Quran. It's nowhere, not even a hint. So mashallah, praise be to God for his guidance. um, That's all we can say. So we
Mashallah,
seek refuge in God all the time, inshallah.
yeah. Mashallah. Yeah, I mean, I think you probably saw when one of them posted the verse from the Bible where they were talking about how like in how in the Bible they're saying that we shouldn't be doing that. We don't shouldn't be doing practicing circumcision, right? And they're using that to prove they're using that to make their point, right? To say that it was Paul who was disputing it and stuff like that, right? But what does it show? It shows the fallacy of their arguments, because their whole argument about why the Quran does not mention circumcision according to them was it because it's according to them it wasn't disputed. And I told them, I'm like, you're saying it wasn't disputed and that's why it's not in the Quran, yet you're posting verses from the Bible where it's straight inside the Bible is being disputed, you know?
So exactly. We said it so many times. Like, look, here
Yeah.
is a dispute. Christians stopped doing it, many of them.
Hmm.
So it wasn't like, whoa,
Exactly.
completely intact.
Yeah, but I mean, for them to post these verses, I think it was
Yeah,
pretty
like very
funny.
blind.
Yeah,
Exactly.
very blind, subhanAllah. And then you can see how they are actually shielded from like even taking heat from that, because what was the response was that we don't want to talk to you. They don't
Yeah.
have
Oh,
any, you know,
talk to people like you, Solomon.
right?
Really, the easiest thing to say. And
Yeah, but
like
that.
right after that,
Go ahead.
I posted, like I said, okay, just find one hint from Quran,
Right.
one proof.
Hmm.
I put her name, I tagged her. So all this
Hmm.
time, I think there's 1 or 2 people I haven't blocked from that community. And
Hmm.
instead of giving me the answer, she blocks me and takes off.
Oh.
I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, here we
yeah,
go.
that
Now,
shows they don't really have any
no
leg to
answer.
stand on, right? Because everything they say is all made of lies, and it falls apart when you start to look at it.
Yep.
But
They
this
kick
is
out.
what the yeah, but this is to me, this is a prime example of when the devil becomes your constant companion and make you believe that you're guided. I mean, You know, these
Yeah.
people believe that they're um,
Astaghfirullah.
the vanguards of submission and all that kind of stuff. And this is scary indeed.
They're just parroting everything.
Hmm.
Not using any of them is not coming up with their sensible of their own
Hmm.
thinking. It's like one unified. It's like literally devil has become their
Hmm.
companion. You know. Now
Right.
they're stuck in it.
Yeah. One time I even asked this happened before when I was there. So we talked about the dispute, and their theory was the dispute must happen from the followers of Abraham. Like, it doesn't matter if the Christians dispute or the Jews dispute it. The dispute has to happen from the followers of. I'm like, where is this law? I mean, where are you getting all this from that, this person has to dispute it? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Anyways. Okay, anybody else has any comments, questions, off-topic questions?
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Pamela.
Sorry, I'm actually on the road. So, even if I had questions, God willing, Saturday.
Oh, okay. Mashallah. We also have one newcomer, Brother Adnan from England. You want to introduce yourself, brother?
Hi, brother. How are you? I'm very impressed with your lecture.
Mashallah, thank you.
Well, my name is Adnan Limani. I'm from Albania, living in UK from 1997. That's it. That's how much I got to say for now. Well, I'm very impressed with the lecture, brother.
Mashallah, God bless you for joining us, and we're very happy to have you. Alhamdulillah,
Thank you
welcome.
so much, brother.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, Masha Allah.
Assalamualaikum.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you guys. Okay, I'm going to put my mic off now and I'm going to listen to you, Salman.
Mashallah. We also have Ali.
That's a
Hello.
newcomer.
Yeah. Ali.
Adam,
Yeah.
Do you
you
have a
have
new
you
Ali?
have you have given Solomon an authority to buck you on that forever. Need to stop this.
Adam Ali?
Yeah.
I'll
I
always
like.
call him Adam,
I
no
give
matter
this
what.
to you.
Sorry,
I,
Pamela?
I think that was his son or daughter, maybe.
I have one more comment on verse
Hmm.
22. The inherited traditions condemned. So the fact is that they said we found our parents carrying on certain practices, and we are following in their footsteps. Um, you know, the problem whenever a messenger brings the message, it basically, if you message is about good things and bad things, it And the message itself is so nice that it doesn't, if people follow the message, it's not going to hurt them. Like if you look at all the message, the truth is so clear that there's no hardship in it. God, in God's message, there is no hardship in religion. It's so simple. It's worshiping God alone. It doesn't have complications of setting up idols and you go to this mazar and you do this many tasbih and this and it's simple, following the truth, right? But why people reject is all the time is this is the fact that it's problem for them that they can change their thinking now after practicing something they inherited. It was so easy to just follow that. When you question something you have been following for such a long time, it's the change is very hard for human being to suddenly think differently. Oh no, so we carry so much baggage of our forefathers, and that's what prevents people to accept actually the truth. Nothing else is so complicated in the message. It's just we're so comfortable that we don't even have to question it. Why are you telling us to now use our brains suddenly? Because it's a lot of work. That's the problem with human beings. You something keep doing with your right hand, and you think your left hand is actually useless. And you never want to try. If you don't exercise that, obviously you will become useless, like mine. So the part of brain, if we don't question something and we don't exercise our logic, we will become illogical people, you know. So they don't want to use any logic. They don't want to use any reasoning. It's so easy to use the inheritance because I'm easy, comfortable the way things are. Status quo, not gonna challenge. And
Mhm.
it's not even in religion. In many things, status quo is not challenged. And that's why societies go down, become corrupt, because people don't challenge the status quo. The way things are going, let's keep them going. Because system is running whether it is corrupt or not.
Yeah, Masha Allah. I just want to make a comment about verse number 15. This is the even sign for him, a share from his own creation. Surely the human being is profoundly unappreciative. I mean, this is such a. I mean, I was trying to think, how come it's kind of linked with unappreciation, like assigning something to God, and it is as taken as an unappreciative person. And appreciation comes from when you appreciate someone for something they do for you, right? So if you do for someone else something and they have to be appreciative to you, so they are actually in fact assigning something to God. He's the creator. He's the one. He did everything. We don't do anything. So these people are, they are assigning something to God, that okay, God will have this and that, whatever it is. And who are we to say that? And that shows unappreciative behavior, that we are doing something for God, you know. And also at the same time, how many times do we? I mean, I was thinking about that. How many times we say things about God that we don't even know? You know, sometimes even like in glorifying, sometimes I even like try to think that is it appropriate to say something about God that I don't even know? You know, like, and that's one of the questions that I want to ask is that, like, sometimes we say God knows every atom, God knows every this and that. I mean, this is actually in a glorification. But can we say something positive about God that we don't even know? Are we committing a sin on that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Hmm. Can you give an example?
Like, you know how we say that God knows every single atom, God knows every single electron, or something like that. I mean, this is like we are glorifying in God in a sense, but I mean, I don't think we find in Quran, right, that something that deep, or something, if we like, you know, can we say something like that in
Yeah, of
glorification?
course. Yeah, of course. I mean, the messenger explains the exact same way. He says, all the creations are in the heavens and the earth are glorifying God. Even a rock and things like that. Even the disbelievers' bodies. I mean, they're all atoms and they're all revolving around the electrons are revolving around the nucleus and all of that stuff. They're all glorifying God. They're following God's laws. So he talks about it, right? So God controls every single thing, like from the tiniest to the biggest, whatever it is. God controls everything. So there's nothing wrong with saying that.
Oh, okay. So in
Mashallah.
glorification, we can say anything we want, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. As long as it's right, as
That's
long as
right.
it's true. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, mashallah. Because whatever your heart is acknowledging
Mm,
God's marvels, right?
right.
And you think about it or say it verbally, it's all glorifies God. Like the system, everything glorifies God. Is like if every atom is nothing is still, right? Everything is vibrating with life and going according. If God wants all the system will become still. Nothing will revolve around anything else. And imagine that. Oh.
Not sure. Thank you.
I just want to have a comment around the blasphemy about baby girls.
Hmm.
It is so sad that I know in Muslim countries they don't assign daughters as uh, gods or angels as being God's daughter, but mostly in Christianity. But the bias against the girls is such a disbelief in and goes against submission that you make a face about face, and not acknowledging that whomever gone, God is running everything, and He has decided whether He will give you boys or girls or both or nothing. So there are ridiculous hadiths about girls they have made. Like if you have if you have three daughters, you're already going to heaven, no matter what you're doing. And why? Yeah. So I have
My
three
dad's
daughters.
definitely going to heaven.
Huh?
I said my dad's definitely going to heaven because he has three daughters.
He does. Yeah, I have three daughters too. I have no son.
Okay.
So
Yes.
no, but the
Yeah.
reasoning that gosh, you such a hardship you have
Mm.
endured to have three daughters. You already forgiven.
Yeah, I mean there's so many. It doesn't even add up. Like they say,
Doesn't
if
even
you,
matter.
yeah, they say like if you're clean, you have attained half the faith. And then there's
Yeah,
other hadith that says, if you're married, you have attained half the faith.
yeah,
So if you're just
everything.
clean and you're married, then you're a believer.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything.
And then they go on the other extent. Like if one hair of your head is left from, when you do wudu and you wipe
Mm.
your head, and if one hair is left from being wet, that's gonna burn throughout the
In
time,
hell.
and in the grave.
Oh, yeah.
That those hair will be burning throughout the time,
Hmm.
and then they make up things like that.
Yeah, and they also had similar things, like they said if you cover your ankles, you know, for guys, how they have to keep their pants over their ankle, like on
Hmm.
top of their ankles, like it
Hmm.
can't cover them. They say the part that is not exposed, is gonna burn in hell. And so like,
Wow.
parts of you are gonna
Yeah,
burn in hell, and the rest of you are
some
gonna be in heaven.
some some parts will end up in heaven and some in hell.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's really sad.
Yeah,
Even though all the parts are gonna be just gone,
yeah.
and the soul will come out as I don't know what. My goodness. Also, like our body is actually submitting. It's
Mhm.
our soul which is not submitting.
Yeah, this is like a whole tragedy. Like they literally go to their graves of their loved ones and they put flowers and this and that for years and years. like there's somebody in there forgetting that this body is just a piece of earth and is going to go back to it, and the real person that we are going to go up and answer, and they have all kind of things where the azab of the grave, that as soon as they put you in the grave, the angels show up and start questioning and all so many different things about the grave azab, this and that.
Yeah, there are books on it. There are completely
Yeah.
separate books on
Retribution.
it. The the azab of grave. So scary,
Retribution,
man.
yeah.
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 The religion comes only by scaring you. Like
Yes.
if you don't do this and there's nothing about why. I mean, the Quran has this message the entire time. Why were we created? Before knowing this is the biggest, like I always say in Quran studies, but the biggest piece of the puzzle for me was finding the purpose of our creation. That's what, like, oh my God, the big moment, it's like, wow, awesome news. Here is an awesome news. God calls it an awesome news. Subhanallah, that is so awesome.
I mean, they miss all this. God talks about heaven, like you have absolutely no idea what's waiting for you, how happiness and joy is waiting for you, on and on. So many beautiful verses, and then so many verses where God's talking about hell. They skip all those and they go straight to the hell. I mean, the grave, and their topics are completely different. They don't talk about hell as much or the heaven. All they talk about is grave, 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 and then right on the top.
Grave.
Yes. And what they talk about is that please pray for my mom, please pray for my dad, that they go to Jannatul Firdaus. I mean, they have absolutely no
Yeah, the
concept,
highest heaven.
right? What is exactly
Oh,
what it is?
I know. If
You know?
only after death people's prayer took you to highest heaven, then nobody would go to hell.
Right.
Right.
I
My
mean,
goodness.
they have absolutely no concept of what is the heaven, hell, and the steps and what it takes to go there. It's just by praying somebody will get there. Then rich people will hire so many servants to pray for them day and night to pray for me that I go to heaven. Which some
Actually,
people
they
still
do.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. I know somebody, a submitter, he said when his grandfather died, his father rented a whole bunch of mullahs who,
Right.
because the grandfather never prayed a single day, a contact prayer.
Right. Right.
So all these people day and night did millions of prayers. I don't know, hundreds and thousands of
Oh my God.
salat for this guy because they paid them to do that.
Oh my
So
God.
for 40 days or something, they paid them huge money to make a recompense for, or to equalize who knows how many salats. How's that even possible?
And those salats are not even right. They're soaking with idol worship. You know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like soaking wet with idol worship.
You know how
Call-
Russia says idol worship not so intelligent? You literally want to
Right.
laugh at these things because it's ridiculous.
I mean, I was like listening to the cross at the same time I was walking with somebody, and they were trying to debate with me the halal and haram meat, and I'm trying to give them the verses, and it's just coming back to square one. And you're like, forget it, man. I'm just gonna walk away.
Yeah, but the irony is that they will drink alcohol, but
Yeah,
they will never eat meat from a non-halal shop.
yeah, yeah.
They wouldn't eat pork either,
Oh,
most of
pork.
them.
Of course not.
Yeah.
I mean, you see these people. They go to they travel so far to go to a restaurant where there's halal meat, and they skip the prayers in between. Only to get the halal meat. I mean, I don't see the logic in it. What's the logic behind it? This guy who slapped my hand, I was drinking from the left hand, he slapped my hand. What you doing? No, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? He said, you have to drink from the right hand. This is sunnah.
That was in
And oh,
Texas?
really? Yeah, they did. So we were sitting in a group, and then somebody slapped my hand, literally.
Yeah, left
I'm
hand
not
is
kidding.
not considered the good
Yeah,
hand.
I was like, should I chop it off?
Oh my God.
I'm
I
sorry.
think you should
It's
move to
attached to my
California.
body. It is attached to my body. I need to chop it off. It's bad.
It's God gave you
Okay,
this an extra for to do
oh my
nothing.
God. Yeah, I don't think I need it. I mean, this is the tragedy of the human being.
You, you know, if you're in a professional sports, I like sports, so I talk about them sometimes. If you're a baseball player and you're a pitcher or a hitter, and there is a term called switch hitter, who can hit from both sides. They are the most expensive. You know, they can use
Right.
the left hand or the right hand. So yeah, and their God has given them the equal strength in both hands. It's like if we are using just one hand, we our other hand becomes not so good. Like I don't think I can, write. My writing from left hand would be like so slow if I try to write compared to the right hand. But some people are gifted that they can use both hands very well, mashallah.
Yeah, sure.
I'm looking at verses 22 and 23, and I think that this shows to me that the people who are practicing circumcision, they're going to continue doing that, of course, but then also, uh, people, more people, like it's not going to go away from these people who are claiming to be submitters because of these verses. I mean, it will continue through their generations
Yeah.
because they say we found our parents following certain practices and we will continue in their footsteps.
It's in present and future.
Yeah, probably more things will add up
Mm,
into there.
yeah.
Always.
And
That's.
Mm, yeah.
as the
But
time
see,
goes on,
it says, consequently, we requited them. Note the consequences for the rejectors. Right? So, consequently, all these people are getting their requittals, one by one. And we see that too.
and then you were reading that God assigns the devil. So the more
Mm-hmm.
deeper they go into this hole, the less they will be able to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
The quicker you take action is better. The longer you wait, the deeper you go in the quicksand, and it's harder you have to be able to get out.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to put up the fire in the beginning stages than to let it burn and get bigger, and then everything is burned down.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing. Obviously, God is the one who's guiding. We can just tell people
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. Take it.
Yeah.
It's a mercy of God that the verse 33 that where it
Mm-hmm.
says that God is not giving mentions to every disbelievers.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, this is actually a mercy. Otherwise, all the
Mm-hmm.
disbelievers will become rich,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, so not giving something to us is a mercy actually. And someone was explaining that you see some people they are so far in the in the sins that, and he said why God is blessing them so much because they have crossed. He said that because they have crossed so many limits. So God
Mm-hmm.
is just giving them take whatever you want right now. If you're not blessed with a lot of money, this is actually a mercy from God that maybe you
Mm-hmm.
can take heed.
Exactly. Okay, so if anybody else has any comments or questions, we can answer. Someone asked a question about on YouTube about verses 81 through 19, 81, 19 to 25. about what did Rashad see according to the Quran. So I posted the video about the fulfillment of the covenant, but I don't think there's any other questions at this time, unless Adam, you have something to say, or maybe anybody else has any questions. Okay, so I guess we could we can actually end the study now, God willing, and God willing, we can have our next study on Saturday, and our teacher is going to be, I suppose, Nudat, or no, Adam. I forget.
No, I was the last one.
Oh, you were the last one. Yeah, you were the last one. That's right. So it's gonna be Nudat, God willing. Okay, Nudat always, yeah, it's always after me. I forget. Okay. Okay, guys. So thank you for all for joining. Masha Allah. And we'll see you guys on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, God willing. Assalamu alaikum.
So
Wa alaikum assalam, brother.